Welcome to the 3-Minute Warning. My name is David Rooney, and today we are going to be joined by Brian Guebert, the Executive Director of Saskatoon Minor Football, and he's here to talk to us about football programs in Saskatoon, football across Canada, and of course, six-a-side football, which is going to be introduced to British Columbia this coming season. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
No, great to see you. Thanks for coming out today. So give us a quick rundown of who you are. I know for a fact that you started football in a very small town, Outlook, Saskatchewan. Is that right?
Yeah, that's where I played my high school football. Yeah, that's correct.
That's fantastic.
Small town.
And then from there you carried on to...
Yeah, I went to play junior football with the Saskatchewan Hilltops, and then university with the University of Saskatchewan Huskies, and then play with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And actually, I had the fortunate, success of being in 8 national championships in a row. I think it was 4 Canadian Bowls, 3 Vanier Cups, and 1 Grey Cup. I don't want to talk about my win-loss record necessarily, but it was pretty cool to play in the final game of the year for 8 years in a row of my post-secondary football career. And then went on to play with the senior national team in 2011 with Football Canada over in Austria there, and went to the World Championship. We lost that to the U.S. as well, but it was a pretty fun playing career, and had a lot of great experiences from that.
That's fantastic. Yeah, well, yeah, when you get to a certain age, you don't talk about your win-loss, but when we do talk to the kids when it comes to these big games, just making it to the big game where so many don't get a chance to play in those championship games, that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the process to be in all of those games, and the friends and the experiences that you have along the way, regardless of the outcome of those championships, which the ones that we did win are pretty special, but just regardless of that, the experience is second to none, and just something that sticks with you in so many different aspects of life.
Absolutely. So from there, you, I guess your high school was pretty small, so you guys were kind of forced into playing six-a-side at the time.
Well, actually, six-a-side football has existed in Saskatchewan now, going on 70 years here. So there's lots of small towns. I think right now we're at about 52 small towns in Saskatchewan that play 6-on-6 high school football. So we're pretty fortunate in that sense. But yeah, I lived in a town of about 2,000 people. I think our school, the high school I went to was only grade 10 to 12, but there was only 120 students. I think we had 23 players on our football team, and we played six-a-side tackle football. But I mean, it was unbelievable. In fact, when I think about how fun that style of game is to play, I honestly don't think there's anything better. I love things about 12-a-side and 11-a-side and 9-a-side and all those different aspects, but six-a-side, you can get so creative, and you just have to be such an expert in terms of your technical execution of skill, because you miss tackle, it probably goes for a touchdown, and you make a great block, you can spring a guy. And so I have a lot of really fond memories of playing six-a-side football for sure.
Oh, that's great. And actually looking at your professional career too, I mean, you were basically a Swiss Army knife in the CFL. You played, what, 5 different positions?
Yeah, whatever the coaches asked me, I was kind of that annoying guy in the first meeting. I remember our rookie meeting with Coach Barry my rookie year, and he goes, "Does anybody in here know how to long snap?" And I looked around. Well, I long snapped 1 or 2 games. I was good enough to be a backup my whole career, but like 1 or 2 games in the CJFL. And so I put up my hand, and lo and behold, I'm snapping in the CFL that year. And does anybody in here know how to kick? Well, I put up my hands. I remember playing in BC Place, being listed as the backup kicker. I was 1 for 1 in my entire career kicking field goals, and that was in a CJFL championship that we played out in Chilliwack there. So it was one of those things. I maybe got a little annoying, but at the same time, I think what happened was, like, I had played fullback all through high school and even university short yardage situations, and we were running a fake field goal show team in practice, and I jumped up and caught the ball, and Coach Barry looks at me and he goes, "You can catch?" And I said, "Well, yeah, of course I can catch. I know how to catch. I played lots of catch as a kid." And next thing you know, I probably extended my career another year in the CFL because they made me a fullback and tight end. And so, it was one of those things. I just wanted to help my team any way I could. And having that versatility and that just confidence in my own skill competence that really really drove me to having success. And that's something that we really try and establish in our players here is know that they come into our programs here in Saskatoon with an empty toolbox, and we want to fill it with as many tools as possible. So that's something that certainly it was imprinted on me as a young football player.
Yeah, I know that you can directly attribute all of your skill set to being part of a six-man football team. But I understand that now that you guys do this through Saskatoon minor football, that your goal and emphasis is on player skill development right from the get-go, not necessarily learning schemes, but learning positions.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was continuing through, in order to play one more year, be eligible for one more year of university football, I did go to school for 8 years in a row. I decided to start a master's degree, and I kind of pitched my own program to the Department of Education here, or College of Education here at the U of S, and I said I want to look research into developmentally appropriate sport. I want to look specifically at the game of football, and I started just my own asking my own questions as an educator, as a kinesiologist, kind of those other 2 degrees I had already. I started watching 12-a-side tackle football and going, okay, they're playing on a 65-yard wide field. They are playing with an adult-sized ball in some cases. They're using 20-yard end zones. They're using 110 yards of distance. And what I seen at the Pee Wee level or the Atom level, is that really football? Well, a lot of coaches, why are we coaching? If they're coaching for success, well, a lot of them are implementing a 4-back backfield with double tight ends. And then it just became let's toss it to our fastest kid, let him get out in space. And then it just becomes a rough game of tag. And I compare that to what we were doing at the junior level or university level or pro level. I'm going, well, that's not football. We don't institute those schemes and all that sort of stuff. And so one of the first things I did in my research was I started looking at, what do other sports do? Well, hockey, basketball, they play 3-on-3, or they shrink the surface, or in basketball they use lower nets and smaller balls, and in soccer they play all sorts of different variations, 5-on-5, 7-on-7, all that sort of stuff. In rugby, we're seeing the success of sevens at the Olympic level even, and again, just changing the game. 3-on-3 basketball is massive on the international stage now in terms of at the senior level. So I was looking at what a lot of other sports do and going, wow, we've really instituted very little change in the game of football itself. And so I started to look at what adaptations, and I went back to my own playing career in high school football, which was 6-a-side tackle football. And I said, well, why don't we shrink the width of the field? Why don't we increase the ratio of players that are eligible players? There's only one ineligible player on a 6-a-side tackle football field. So more people have the opportunity to touch the ball. But then instead of us focusing as a sport into the world of skill specialization, we start looking at skill generalization, because a player that has to be really good at blocking may also have to catch or carry the ball. So now we have to look at a much more diverse skill set that we need to give these players. And as I went through all this research, I really started answering the question of, wow, 6-a-side is a really good mode to teach the fundamentals of football, because tackling doesn't change no matter how many people are on the field. In fact, it challenges you, because you have, like I said, you got to make that tackle or somebody's going to score. Hey, it increases scoring, which increases engagement, both of the fans and the players. And it makes them believe they have a chance every time that they can be on the field as well. And it gets more people an opportunity to touch the ball, which, if you survey kids when they're 10 years old, pre-puberty, nobody wants to be the next, Trent Richardson lineman, or any of those guys, like these Pro Bowl guys. And I'm having a tough time naming some people right now that are offensive linemen, because nobody wants to be them. They want to be Tom Brady or Chase Claypool or, those guys that touch the ball on a regular basis. So why not give them the chance? Because one of the advantages we have in football is we're a late developing sport. You don't have to be good when you're 10 years old or 12 years old, or the bantam draft in hockey, or U11 Premier Soccer, or whatever you call it. We're not looking at becoming elitist at a really young age. We're looking at being developmental, because when these kids turn 17, 18 years old, there's opportunities for scholarships. In fact, a disproportionate amount of scholarships to play football versus any other sport. So when you think of the opportunities afforded to our football players, if we provide them that skill set, we provide them that healthy environment in which to develop those skills, develop a love for the game, a passion for the game without early burnout, then those opportunities are going to present themselves when they get older. So that's something that was really exciting to me when I did my research, and it just seemed like a no-brainer when I started putting everything together here. And now we run a six-a-side football league in the spring as a developmental league where we have a curriculum here. So we actually determine what plays coaches can run. We give them a collection of plays so they can still choose from variety, but we say you can only run these plays in week 1, and then add these plays in week 2, and add these plays in week 3. So it's not about out-scheming your opponent. It's about developing those skill sets of blocking, tackling, catching, throwing, ball carrying, moving, and really allowing kids to play both sides of the ball, multiple positions, because when they're pre-puberty, we can't determine what position they might play when they're, a senior in high school football. We just need to give them the best. I mean, people ask me what's the best talent identification of a young Pee-wee kid. Well, how tall are your parents and what's your shoe size? That might be your best talent identifier. So, those are some of the things that really, really stuck with me when I was doing my research. And then the other thing is looking at the history of six-a-side football. Why was six-a-side football invented in the first place? Well, it actually happened in the States during the Dirty 30s. People couldn't afford to travel to go to larger high schools, or the teams couldn't afford to travel greater distances. So in Nebraska and Texas is the kind of two places it started right away. Was they said, as smaller communities, we're going to create 6-on-6 tackle football teams. We're going to reduce the amount of travel, but we're still going to have meaningful competition and give our kids something to do that still develops their skill sets. Where Nebraska and Texas, let's not kid ourselves, football is pretty important in those places. But that's the rationale to why it happened. Was we want to have as much reach of the game of football as possible, regardless of your size of community, regardless of the economics of your community. We want to be able to provide an opportunity for as many kids to play football as possible. And we're really seeing that here in Saskatchewan. Like even in our minor league in Saskatoon, we have teams from surrounding towns and communities that come in and play in our league because they can get 14 kids together to make a six-a-side football team, or 20 kids together, or maybe in some of the bigger communities, they have 2 or 3 teams of 15 to 20 kids. And it's a great way, because as a high school football coach, or as a junior football coach or university football coach, if you told me we were developing quadruple the number of quarterbacks in a small community versus just one guy that gets to play quarterback, or one running back that gets to touch the ball regularly, I'm thinking that's way better for my program as these kids climb the ladder and really get a better opportunity. So that was kind of how I looked at it, I guess, from an academia perspective, and in terms of how can we make this game of football better, and how can we better prepare ourselves and our kids for success at higher levels, and really develop that football IQ, those skill sets, and like I said, fill that empty toolbox with as many tools as possible.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah. Being part of community football for a long time, I know that what usually starts a kid playing a sport is because his friends play it. And the reason why he wants to play is because his friends tell him how much fun it is. And you're right. As soon as you get that more engagement, you're right. Everybody wants to be the quarterback. Everybody wants to be the running back. Everybody wants to make the big catch. And if you can get those kids out there with more engagement, it absolutely works every single time. So tell me how we do have a lot of pushback, right, in some areas in BC mostly because, we're traditionalists. We know that if it's not 12-man football, then it's not real football. But we do know that flag football, for instance, is growing exponentially. We have the most engagement of players membership across BC, and it's growing year over year. How important is bringing six-a-side to, say, the Adam Division, U10 in BC, going to improve our numbers based on what you've seen in Saskatchewan?
I think both the flag game and the six-side game complement each other so well. I mean, in terms of a developmental sport as well, flag football is a great tool to do that, to develop those catching, throwing, moving in space. And in fact, I'm a firm believer that flagging somebody is probably a more difficult skill than tackling somebody, because you can get away with a lot more tackling somebody than you can pulling flags off their hips. But in terms of making that transition into getting kids familiar with contact, really developing those safe contact skills and playing with your heads up and things like that. Six-a-side makes that awesome transition into flag football. I mean, from a just adding those skill sets, you're looking at adding blocking, you're looking at adding tackling, you're looking at wearing equipment for the first time. So it's a nice, stepped progression from here we go with flag to the six-a-side model. And I think, in terms of the naysayers about six-a-side football, I think that there's so many opportunities for us. Like I said, like if we're looking to expand the reach, like I look as a key measurable of success for our organization is growth. Well, if I know that six-a-side football can exist in communities XYZ, then great, they have football now. Whereas I know 12-a-side football, there isn't the population for it. So if we can just get a foothold into some of these communities, we're gonna see the cream rise to the top. You never know where these great players are going to come from. I mean, in the CFL this year, there's they just came out with their draft prospects for this year. Well, there's two offensive linemen from Yorkton, Saskatchewan, that are rated in the top 11 of this year's CFL draft prospects, and they played together in a small town here in Saskatchewan. Well, I mean, if they didn't have six-a-side and nine-a-side growing up through their minor programs, they may not have developed those skill sets and developed those opportunities to play at a pro level. But regardless of that elite stream of things, our game is healthier the more people you have in it. So if you can reach out, I mean, if you look at, say, the BC Valley, the Okanagan Valley, for instance, I mean, you got your big centers like Kelowna that is very successful in football. I know Vernon's had a lot of success, but why don't we hear more regularly of Penticton and Summerland and further down at Oliver Osoyoos? Like, why aren't they playing six-a-side football? Why aren't they developed? There's got to be kids there that want to play football, that are fans of football. So giving them the opportunity to do so, I think, is a great opportunity. And again, flag's a great introduction into it. But one of the beauties of tackle football is there has to be an investment from the community. It's not a major investment because with six-a-side, there's fewer players playing and you don't have to buy as much equipment and all that sort of stuff, unless there's the demand for it, of course. But with flag football, it's easy to start it up and then throw those flags and those balls in a closet and forget about it. But when you buy, a few $1,000s worth of tackle football equipment, nobody wants to see that just get sat on a shelf and not used, right? So you're going to see a greater, when you have a greater buy-in from a community, you usually have a greater turnaround in terms of how that's being promoted. And that's where six-a-side really is a nice transition. And I mean, what a great place to start if you do have the aspirations of having a 12-a-side program or an 11-a-side high school football program. Hey, six-a-side's a great opportunity to do it. And then just thinking outside the box. I think football is a great sport, but why are we not seeing it in the BC Summer Games or the Saskatchewan Summer Games in our case? Well, hey, six-a-side football, we can make all-star teams of six-a-side football players from probably every sporting zone in the province and play a tournament style at a BC Summer Games or a Jeux Canada Games or something like that. And you're talking about smaller team sizes. You're talking about easier to host in dorms and feed and all that sort of stuff. Travel with, and then that's the other appeal is with the smaller team sizes. One of the challenges we have is finding coaches. We're coaches, the parents that we twist their arms and we say, hey, we really need you to help coach if football is going to exist for your son or daughter. Coaches find it far less daunting to coach a team of 14 players because guess what? Soccer's got teams of 14 players. Basketball's got teams of 14 players. Hockey's got teams of 14, 15, 20 players. It's not a daunting size of players to manage. Whereas when you talk about a 12-a-side team with 40 to 60 players, now all of a sudden you're managing a whole lot of people and it becomes more challenging. And a lot of those casual volunteers go, yeah, maybe not. But when it's 6-a-side and it's a little more intimate setting, and you as a coach can have more one-on-one time with those kids and develop that individual skill set, the sky's the limit. You can really, really dive down with your players, get to know them on a more personal level and really develop their skill sets and really instill that passion and love for a game without being out of your comfort zone of having to manage 50, 12-year-olds on a 12-a-side football team.
So, yeah, let's break it down here for those folks that are watching that don't really know the basics of 6-a-side. So 14 players on a team. How many games can you play simultaneously on a standard football field?
I mean, it depends on the model. So in our spring league model that we have here in Saskatoon, we've got a full size field here right at SMF Field, and it's got a longer runoff here. So I think we're 90 yards wide by 180 yards long is our turf with a 65 by 110 with 20-yard end zone field in the middle of it. We put six-a-side fields on here at once. So again, economies of scale, 6-a-side is great because that rent per hour goes down so much when you have 12 teams playing at once. We do a shootout style of game at that level. So again, take the load off of our coaches, say, hey, we're not going to worry you about developing punt schemes and punt return schemes and kickoff, kick return, and looking at it from a safety perspective. That's why we took it out. I mean, obviously, we've seen the NFL basically eliminate kickoffs from the game anyways. And so what we do is we play shootout style. Usually in the early part of the year, we tell the players, you get 6 plays in a row. Could be 6 fumbles in a row, could be 6 touchdowns in a row. But the idea is to just get familiar with your offense and your play calls. We have coaches in the huddle. We make sure that the communication to the players is good. And then we also have the coaches really communicate with each other, because one thing we tell our coaches, we don't keep score standings in our spring league to make it, again, put the emphasis on developmental. And so we tell our coaches, your job is to make it fair for the other team. So if you've got a stud playing offensive end, which is basically guard for people that don't understand it, it's a tight end. There's a center and 2 tight ends is what you typically have on a line in 6-a-side football. So if you got an absolute monster playing end, well, coaches are on the field and they say, oh, that guy's really good. Can we put our best player over top of him? And then they have a good challenge, because it's about making the game fair for other people and challenging those kids' skill sets. Because if you just let one kid run roughshod over another, are they really getting better? Are they starting to develop bad habits, right? And so that's one of the things that we really put in as a point of emphasis with all of our coaches is we want you to be competitive, but it's not going to be reflected on a scoreboard. It's going to be reflected between you two. So hey, which coach can get more kids to catch the ball during this game? Or which coach can take more plays to score a touchdown than just tossing it to your fastest kid and letting him, juke everybody out of their boots and score a touchdown. So we really challenge our coaches on that aspect. And then playing kids at multiple positions. Once Johnny scored 2 or 3 touchdowns, hey, let's have them learn how to snap the football, or let's have them play some linebacker, or let's have him try throwing a few, or maybe if he's ran a few in as from a rushing standpoint, let's see if he can catch the ball. So we're out there, and our game day conveners are often walking right into the huddles with the coaches, saying, "All right, hey, let's find some new ways to be creative and do those sorts of things." So, yeah, six fields on a standard football field at once is certainly doable. You only need one or two referees. Usually two. We sometimes have three referees for a game, and it's great. And then the other thing we instruct our referees to do at the younger age level is, hey, you're there as educators. You don't necessarily have to throw flags and implement the penalties. You have to say, hey, get your hands inside, that's holding, and educate the kids, because that's just another opportunity they have to learn the game. Because at the younger ages, these kids aren't taking penalties because they're trying to take advantage of a situation. They're still learning the game. So our officials do a great job of ensuring the safety of the game and then educating our players on the rules of the game as well.
How long does a typical game last, and how many games would a team play in a single game day?
We do 1 hour straight time games, and so we try and make sure that each team gets an equal number of possessions during a game. Again, with the smaller team sizes, like I said, we kind of aim for that average team size of 18 to 20, but we'll go as small as 14 and as large as 24 in some cases if it suits the community, but we try not to go over that so kids get lots of playing time. And then especially when we have larger teams, we'll sometimes schedule them for a doubleheader in a night, because we know that everybody's rotating through, everybody's playing multiple positions. The pace of the game is controlled quite nicely. And again, when you have a standardized playbook and standardized curriculum and insertion schedule, they get in and out of the huddle quite well, actually. And with the coaches being in the huddle, if there's any confusion, you take care of it before the ball's snapped. And it's really been quite an efficient way of running and introducing the game of tackle football to our young participants.
Fantastic. Anything else you want to mention that anything of the benefits for six-a-side?
Well, one of the things, it's a phrase that we have associated with our six-a-side league, is it's half the players but twice the athletes. That idea there is that we equip them with as many skills as possible. We play them in multiple positions. They really start to grasp the entire concept of the game of football from both the offensive and defensive sides. They understand the game at such a rapid pace. If you watch the learning curve of these young participants throughout the season, they really grasp it. And I mean, with fewer players on the field, safety is always the first priority for all of us in the football world, right? Fewer players on the field, you have less confusion, you have less pileups, you have less opportunities where a kid could get piled into or rolled up on because of the mass number of bodies in play, especially when they don't quite understand what they're doing when they're learning the game for the first time. So there's less opportunities to be deceptive from a scheme perspective, but at the same time, there's so many opportunities for things you can do from a scheme perspective, because you have 5 eligible players and only 1 ineligible. And so the only ineligible player on the offense is somebody who plays in the middle of a 3-person line. So anybody can snap the ball. It doesn't matter if it's an eligible player who snaps the ball or not, but whoever's in the middle of that 3-person line is the ineligible player. And then same thing on defenses. Hey, I use this phrase all the time. You can't teach a zone player to play man, but you can teach any man player to play zone. Well, when you're playing one-on-one defense, you almost have to play one-on-one defense to be successful at six-a-side. So you're instilling these concepts of, hey, we have to run with these individuals. We have to run with the Chase Claypools of the world, because that's what we have to do to be successful, because it's not sound otherwise with 5 eligible players on the field. So you're developing these skill sets at a young age, and as opposed to, and I'll say it as a high school football coach at 12-a-side, I try and hide players all the time on defense, and zone defense is a great way to hide players, but you can't hide players at the 6-a-side league, which is great because you want to develop those skills, instill that confidence, and make these kids understand the actual foundations of the game. Because again, regardless of how many players are on the field, you still have to block, tackle, catch, carry, protect the ball at all costs. Those are all fundamentals of the game of football. And sometimes they're magnified in the six-a-side game. So I think it's a great game for establishing it in new communities, regardless of age, for teaching it at that Adam and Pee Wee level. I think it's a phenomenal game. And you're going to see as things kind of ramp up here, you'll probably see some hunger to play it at higher and more competitive levels. And my vision certainly is, if we could ever get tackle football into the Canada Games, into the summer games of the provinces here, heck, maybe even the Olympics, it would be an amazing thing to see. And I think it's just a great way to highlight the skill sets of some pretty incredible athletes.
Well, my biggest argument when anybody talks against six-a-side is if it works in Saskatchewan and Texas, which basically where football is a religion, it's going to work anywhere. And with the BCCFA, we truly believe that all football is good football. And so in 2022, we're going to be launching six-a-side at the Adam Division in the Valley, as well as the Interior is going to be doing that. And so to your point earlier, where it's going to be started in Kelowna, Kamloops, it'll start branching out too to that Penticton area, Salmon Arm, Vernon, which has always been strong, especially in the Spring Flag area. So yeah, I think this could be very, very good for football in BC in general. So before I go, as of taping today, this is the Sunday of the 2022 wildcard weekend for the NFL, and I understand you're a Steelers fan, so I guess you'll be front row center watching that today on TV.
Absolutely, I'm cheering for those Steelers. Ben's last run here, and hopefully those young guys like Claypool and Najee Harris pull it through. And my wife's a Chiefs fan, so we're going to be a house divided tonight.
Fantastic. Well, Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I do look forward to when you actually get out to BC this spring. You're going to be coming down and doing a few training sessions, camps, etc. for six-a-side to help launch it with us, and we really appreciate that. So thank you so much for your time, and all the best.
No problem. Love to be a part of it.
Thanks so much. Well, my name is David Rooney. Thank you for joining us once again on the 3-Minute Warning. Tune in next time for another great football guest. And I would like to say thank you to all those folks that are sharing our feed to social media. I've got friends back east. I've got friends all over Canada who are sharing this. And it's just helping to spread the word about youth football. And it can only be good because that's our goal at the end, is just to help grow this game. Thank you very much and have a great day.